Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Haere mai ki tēnei hui, te iwi o rangatahi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everybody to our first Arts, Culture and Heritage meeting of this triennium. Feels like we've been a long time in getting underway, but here we are. Usual rules apply, and I see everybody in the chamber is really familiar with this, so I'll draw your attention to the health and safety requirements on the screen. Fire and emergency, if we do have an alarm, leave the site immediately via the nearest fire exit and evacuate to the assembly area, which is at the clock tower in Te Marae o Hine. Smoking and vaping is prohibited within any council, public entrance building or site. If we are in need of a defibrillator, one's located in the lobby area there, and any near misses or incidents, please have a chat with the committee administrators are up here to my right. You'll all be aware that the meeting's being recorded and live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. And as normal, if I could ask, as presenters come to speak, if you could give your names before speaking and use the microphone. And if you need help to get any of your technology running, then give us a wave and we'll make sure that happens. So as we look to formally open the meeting, I'm going to invite the new Deputy Chair of Arts, Culture and Heritage, Councillor Zabellin, to open us with Karakia, please. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Me noi tātou. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai kie, kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Katie. So, to the first item of business, which is apologies. There's a recommendation that the committee receive the apologies from the Mayor on early departure on council business, which I'm happy to move. Seconded by Councillor Zabellin. Any others? I am hoping we're going to move pretty quickly through the agenda today, so all good. Councillor Johnson.
Just if we are still going at 3:30, then I'll be an apology for early departure on council business. Thank you.
I don't imagine that that's required, and if we're still going at 3:30, I'll be an apology. Do you want to add that just for completeness? Or no, we think we're okay. We won't be here at 3:30. The administrators are confident. Okay, I will ask you to vote on that, please. Carried with 11 votes in favour. That's unanimous. Excellent. Thank you. I have no notification or of additional items or any declarations of interest. Give you a moment to indicate if there's anything there. Being none, we'll move to our first substantive item, which is a presentation about the Untold Stories project from Tanya Kapitko, who is well known to us in the chamber. Welcome this morning, Tanya. Lovely to have you with us. Let's just get your microphone going. You need to press the right-hand side button so your red light comes on.
Oh, member of the public.
You are all live. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, Mayor Smith, Councillor Bowen, councillors, staff and public who are here. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Tanya Kapitko and I am the team leader of the Untold Stories project, which focuses on displaced persons who came to Palmerston North and New Zealand following World War II. This year, for 2 days, on October the 17th and 18th, we are holding a unique and very special event, celebrating our stories. This will be the first national event ever held to celebrate the arrival of up to 5,000 displaced persons to New Zealand. There have been small gatherings of specific ethnic groups around specific ship arrivals, but not a whole group descendant meeting before. In Palmerston North, it will be held at the Distinction Hotel Ballroom in Cuba Street, which takes up to 500. And on Sunday, we travel across to Pahiatua, where the Pahiatua Marae will host us, returning to Palmerston North at the end of the day. Our team is Mikhailov, Bruno Petrinas, whom you may know, Susie Sarklis, Mary Zambezos, and myself, all with very exotic New Zealand names. Our team are all descendants of displaced persons, or DPs, who settled in Palmerston North. Celebrating Our Stories is the first national event to be held. Approximately 5,000 displaced persons came to New Zealand to live between 1949 and 1952. However, some came before, from 39, and others continued after, such as after the failed 1956 Hungarian uprising. They came not on a humanitarian program, but were brought here by the New Zealand government to fill a skilled labour gap following World War II shortages and our need for development. Our research shows that the return for the New Zealand government was considerable, and that they and their children have contributed strongly to New Zealand. We have presented a number of talks on these issues as part of our consciousness raising of this largely unknown area of New Zealand migration. It is not to be confused with the migration of Polish children who came under a government humanitarian program. For the event, we will welcome displaced persons, their descendants, people who worked or supported the DPs, researchers, and those who are interested in this era of New Zealand history. Attendees will come from across New Zealand, but also some are wanting to come from Australia, USA, and Canada. The latter two are people that have been born in Palmerston North. Interest in registering is high, and online registration will open in 2 weeks. The early bird fee closes on the 1st of July, which should give us an indication of actual attendee interest. The celebratory event focuses on stories relating to the DPs, their journeys and settlement in New Zealand, and also their legacy. On day one, there will be keynote speakers, and we have as our special keynote Dr. Anne Beaglehole, historian, a Jewish Hungarian refugee whose maiden name was Segoy, so don't be fooled by Beaglehole. We have workshops, opportunities to learn about family research, resources and records relating to DPs, which is a difficult research area because of its cross-cultural and political implications, and opportunities to meet within and across cultures and discuss. In the evening, we will have a celebratory buffet dinner with some performances. On day 2, we travel to Pahiatua Marae, who will host us for the day, and there will be a visit to the campsite and nearby memorial. On the campsite, which is now a farmer's field and airstrip, there will be a very special commemorative event and blessing, which has not been done before. We will visit the Pahiatua Museum and see material relating to the displaced persons, as well as a remount of our Untold Stories exhibition. We believe Palmerston North is well placed for this gathering. We have a strong history of supporting migrants and diversity, and we hope that this project, born in this city, will add to that. We have, as you know, good transport, easy access, a compact centre, so we believe that people that come here will be able to enjoy it. And thanks to the City Council events, we've got a nice comprehensive brochure to send out, which explains exactly what you can see, do and have fun with, as well as our accommodation, from the high end to the lower end. Our team are very proud of this city because it gave a good home and opportunity to our parents, who in turn gave back. And a little background for those of you that may not know us. We started this project in 23, and in 24 we held the Untold Stories exhibition in Square Edge, which some of you attended. We made a film, which is online and still being watched internationally with over 1,000 views, and it is on Manawatu heritage. And we published a book, which the Mayor has there. I've got one in the basket. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and it's still for sale, and we'll be selling more of them at the event. The response to our initial project was quite amazing. It was far, far beyond what we expected. People came to the exhibition from surrounding regions, Taranaki, Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Then we knew we had touched on something in New Zealand heritage that was untold and that has led to this project. Since 24, there has been interest in such a gathering, and people have been registering their interest in that. So we have over 200 registered. We have kept the project alive since, I'm just throwing some photos up there of the exhibition and that, since 2024 with an informative Facebook site, regular stories such as on back issues, and they then go online. We've presented for 2 years in the Heritage Festival, including a small exhibition, and we've got one up there now, and we do a presentation at 1 o'clock on Monday on Southern European and Balkan heritage in Palmerston North, and we have presented at genealogical groups in the wider region in Northland and written for their publications. And that is the way that we reach out to descendants of DPs, because there's no database and women change their names often with marriage, so we've got no idea where these descendants of the 5,000 are, but they're contacting us thanks to good coverage. We have also reached out to the media, and we're in the middle of a national campaign where articles are going in the newspaper asking, letting people know that this is happening, and the Listener has picked this up and they're going to do a feature article for the Anzac issue. So we're quite pleased about the progress to date. I can't say that the Middle East oil crisis is necessarily pleasing us at all. Anyhow, if this event goes well, we feel that it could bring in more such events. We have restricted it to 500, potentially with 5,000 people coming, it could be much larger than that. But I think that if it was larger than that, it would turn into a home and garden show, rather than something that is more a whānau feeling, which I think is really, really important for what we're trying to do. So we will stick to a restriction of 500, and I think that's a safe way to go forward. As I said, Palmerston North is well placed to host this exciting project from many perspectives, and we thank the City Council and the Earl Trust for supporting the first part of the project. That's our current exhibition in the library, so you'll have to please go and have a look at that. Our talk on Monday. And we thank you for that support, and we hope that maybe in the future you will consider supporting this project. We believe will bring a very positive focus to our city. I know that Gillian has kindly alerted us to all grants possible, and Tararua Council are also being very positive. So we feel well supported and well advised, thanks to City Council. And it's true, I'm not just making it up and schmarming you. All right, so we actually warmly invite you to our opening on Saturday the 17th of October, which the Mayor has kindly agreed to open, and some of you may wish to join more of it. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Tanya. That was very comprehensive, taking us through your event, and I note the Mayor checking his diary there. Councillor Johnson had a question.
I've got a few questions, but thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Tony. That's very exciting. You said that there's no database of these people, so was there no follow-up by the New Zealand government as to how people managed or settled?
No, not at all, because it wasn't a humanitarian program. So they, up to 4,000 were sent to Pahiatua camp for 6 weeks. Some stayed longer, of English language and understanding New Zealand society. That we were a democracy, because these people came from different sorts of countries. And then they were put on a 2-year contract to work, and they were sent all over the place: hydro dams, railway work, forestry, factories, oddlands here in town. And then after that, they were free to apply to go and live in whatever city they would like to, and find their own work. And at that stage they were still aliens, so they had to register with the police if they were to leave the city, and they stayed in that status until they were granted citizenship, which was usually 5 years after having arrived, and that involved being interviewed by the police and immigration. All those files are in the archives, largely restricted, so that was an interesting exercise to find that out. But other records that might exist on them were in the Hope Gibbons archive in Wellington, which burnt down about 3 months after all the records were placed there from Pahiatua camp.
Okay.
Another reason why it's untold.
Do you have a sense of if many people stayed around this area where they had originally come to?
Yes, in fact, we'll discuss that a little bit on Monday. People certainly came here from Pahiatua camp while they were at Pahiatua camp, so they could experience a larger city. And some, after their work experience wherever they were, did come to Palmerston North, and some joined back with their families who were in Palmerston North. Within the Greek community, after 2 or 3 years, because they were quite business orientated, a lot of them decided that there was more opportunity in Wellington or Auckland. So in the end, we had a small but very active migrant community. A number, probably about 200 in the end, maybe. Okay. 200 Greeks at its height. There would be more. It's hard to know. I have to plough through telephone books. This is something I talk about on Monday, because in fact, even though we know that there were people here in 1951, it's not until the 60s that the names start coming through. So they either didn't have telephone, shared party lines. It's quite interesting. And then women changed their names, and so it goes on. So a lot of them we knew from school, and we're relying on that, where we contact somebody in Taranaki, and then they say, oh yes, I know such and such that went to school with me. That's why the genealogical groups are useful. Largely Kiwis, but they remember someone they went to school with this name, or such and such changed her name. So it's an interesting research project.
It sounds like you've got enough for a PhD then.
I've got one, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Tanya, for sharing this initiative with us. Just a brief question. Interested, you reference a number of different ships and different groups coming, but what's the knowledge of what language groups and what cultures were brought into the nation through that?
Yes, well, we do know that sort of thing. I haven't got all the stats in front of me, but the two highest represented ethnic groups would be the Polish and the Greeks.
Okay.
And I'm not sure at the moment, in my adding up, which one's going to win. But this year is the anniversary, seventh anniversary of the Goya sailings, which instead of coming from Germany, which took a lot of the Baltic people and the Eastern Europeans, this one came from Greece or Italy. And as a result, you've got more Balkan people coming on this one, but still Poles. I mean, the Polish were so badly affected by World War II that they ended up being all over Europe for various reasons. But yes, there's also Balkans, Turks, Yugoslavs, because it was Yugoslavia then, Czechs, Hungarians, and Russians. Yeah. Well, there's actually Belarusians and Ukrainians, but a lot of them in the ship's records were all classed as either Russians or they were stateless, in which case, unless you know the surname, you don't know what country they have no longer got.
Thank you for that insight, Madam Chair.
I would like to
Oh.
add that these people largely suffered from trauma.
I can imagine that would be.
Yes, so your question about what assistance they got is an interesting one, but their desire for survival and to create a new life was extremely strong. But when you read ship's records of the people that went to Pahiatua camp and you see beside their name, their first residence was Porirua Mental Hospital. You know that something went wrong on the ship over. But they're a minority, and the rest really just got on. And
We do have another couple of questions, Tanya, if you're okay. We might just need to keep that a bit brief. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Marshall Lobb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā koe whae Tanya. I just wondered, given that I've seen some anecdotal evidence, if you have contacted iwi, because there was a lot of those who also whakapapa to Māori, and maybe as a way to get a more comprehensive database, that might be an idea. Have you considered that?
we haven't actually, and that's an extremely good idea. We've sort of gone general, although we have picked up Boris Sokratov, and who is Māori, and we know that in fact you're absolutely right, because many of the people within the Balkan areas in Eastern Europe actually had traditional values very close to Māori, and we know that there were good relationships, and we know at Pahiatua camp that they all went eel fishing and smoking eels together. So there's plenty of anecdotal evidence to show that the relationships were good. And we do, even within our group, two of our members are either Ngāi Tahu or Taihapiwe. So yes, I hadn't thought of contacting iwi. I've been using LinkedIn and other things like that.
Oh, ka pai, I'm sure they'd be happy to help, and I do know that even for those who come from Croatia, referred to as Tarara up north, so, and there's a large number of them. Oh, ka pai, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fire Deb. Councillor Finlay, last question.
Yeah, my interest is after you said that they lost all the records, there have been a lot of refugees coming into New Zealand, particularly around Palmerston North too. What has been put in place for the ones that are coming now, that we don't lose that history as such, or the records of where they go and how they migrate?
To that, in a way, I wouldn't really know. One would hope that the organisations that work with them would be keeping some sort of record of migrations and such like, but that's not a job that's their first priority. Records, in terms of official records, will be lying with the ministries, appropriate ministries, and they would sit there. Now we have a better archival system, we shouldn't have any fires, so that when those are passed across. And all such records are confidential, like adoption records.
Yeah, so in 50 years' time, the same sort of problem won't exist.
Well,
We hope.
in 50 years' time, I mean, it's well past 50 since our parents have passed on, and yet Ministry has not granted easy access to these documents. We have to prove who we are. And I think that that's because they just forgot about them. I don't think it's on purpose. I think it's just been... but yeah, I think that there is a heritage issue around that which Palmerston North might want to consider somehow in terms of keeping a record of the waves of different people that have come here as migrants, and that includes people that have come from England or Ireland or Scotland or Wales. It's all the people that have contributed to this country in their many ways.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions, Tanya, so thank you so much for coming in to talk to your project, Untold Stories. I think that reflects what I know of your deep commitment to these stories from a personal point of view, but also from a community point of view, of making sure that the stories we're telling cover all of the stories as much as we can, and to Councillor Finlay's point that the stories of people who come here now will be the stories of the future, and we hope that those aren't untold for similar reasons. And I'll also take this opportunity to thank you for your work on the board of the Regent. We've got the Regent coming shortly, and also on our Heritage Reference Group. Thank you, Tanya, for all the work you do in this space for our city. The recommendation is that the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee receive the presentation for information, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Zabellin. Open for any comments before we vote. Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. I'm just so impressed with what Whaitania and everyone have done. I've gone to the library and heard her speak. I've seen the enthusiasm and pride that people have in understanding their whakapapa and bringing that to, I suppose, for everyone to hear. But the stories are really rich, and I thank you because it gives a really good insight into their struggles, our struggles, and also the success. And when I mentioned about the Tarara up north, they're very proud of their whakapapa. And not last year, but the year before, I got to meet the ambassador from Croatia. And she had come over here. I was amazed because she met me and said, "Tēnā koe, kei te pēhea koe," and I went, "Oh, kei te whai ahau." And she had told me that she had come to Aotearoa to look for descendants from there, and she said most of them were Māori, you know, because of the relationship that they had had, and so they had shared with her both sides of their heritage, but were very proud also, and they too knew the stories of their ancestors, of their parents, of their grandparents, and they wanted to know more. So thank you very much, Whaitania. Kia ora.
Kia ora whaia. I will ask you to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is the Regent Theatre Trust Board Draft Statement of Intent 2026 to 29. I will invite David Walsh, General Manager of the Regent, and Neil Ulrich, Chair of the Trust Board, to come and present. There's an officer report that leads this, and Sarah Claridge is available to answer questions on that, elected members, if you have any. But I will hand to the Trust for their presentation. Hello, Neil. Hello, David. Lovely to have you with us. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, tēnā koutou katoa, te mare. And thank you for the opportunity to come present our draft SOI and to answer any questions that you have. I'm, as you said, Neil Ulrich, Deputy Chair of the Regent Theatre Trust Board. I'm here acting for David Lee, our Chairman, who's fortunate enough to be travelling overseas at the moment. Before I hand over to David to speak in more detail to our performance and the SOI, just a few comments from the board. We've had a really good time. Business is good at the Regent. We've had some incredible numbers come through and some wonderful shows. You know, I was there last night for a board meeting and was incredibly surprised that we had 1,000 people, over 1,000 people in the theatre, and it was not related to St. Patrick's Day at all. But if you look at the start of this year that we've had, you know, 3 Jimmy Carr shows, 2 rock orchestra shows, thousands of people coming through the Regent Theatre. We've had a really good start of the year. And if you look at our forward bookings, it's just getting better. And David will speak to the numbers for the rest of this year, and I would say the majority of next year that we have bookings for. Now, that's all really uncertain in the times that we live at the moment. And so as a board, we have a real renewed view and management of what we see as our critical risks going forward, and a lot of focus on proactive and responsible governance, in particular financial governance. So if you look at our financial state, it's looking pretty good, but it's deliberately looking good so that we have reserves to deal with the uncertainties of the future. Now, cost of living, travel, those kinds of things all impact future bookings of the theatre, so we need to be responsible in that regard. But having built up those reserves, we've also been able to invest quite heavily into new technology, new equipment, including we're sort of halfway through a project to upgrade all the lights in the theatre on stage and off stage to LEDs. We've raised about $250,000 already for a project that's $500,000 through grant funding and through the Friends and own reserves. And we're really thankful to the support that we've had from grant funders and others in that regard. But so we are quite excited about the future. From the board governance point of view, 4 years ago we started operating subcommittees. That has gone really well, doing the heavy lifting for the board, but also providing a buffer and support for the general manager and for staff. Last night we signed off on the new focus areas, the new activities for these subcommittees going forward into the next 3 years, and there are some really exciting projects that we're going to be working on, including things like equipment upgrades, greater community engagement, precinct development, and one of the very new ideas that we have is streaming. Now, we do some streaming with Massey graduations, for example, but we're looking at possibly extending that offering. So a really good period, I think, to be involved with the Regent Theatre. Look, I'm going to end off just by thanking Council for your support. It's been tremendous working with you, and we really look forward to working with you going forward for the betterment and the benefit of our community. And with that, I'll hand over to David.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors, Mr Mayor. We're here to present our statement of intent, which outlines the Trust's responsibility to manage, develop, promote and maintain the region on Broadway for the benefit of the Manawatu community and visitors from further afield. While our core obligations virtually remain consistent each year, our performance outcomes are variable and can be influenced by external factors beyond our control. Although our current results are strong, our future targets may be affected by the global uncertainty and rapidly rising costs. These pressures raise valid questions about the viability of future touring for both international and local artists, the impact that this will have on ticket pricing, and ongoing audience engagement may well affect our targets. Despite these challenges, we remain optimistic and have set our forthcoming performance measures accordingly. Turning to our current performance, in the first 6 months of the financial year, this July to December, the auditorium was used on 146 days, compared with 121 days for the same period last year. We hosted 24 national or international hires, up from 19 last year. Attendance figures for this 6-month period remained strong at over 60,000, which is consistent with the previous year. Our financial performance is solid. Stage 2 of our lighting replacement program progressed with support from Central Energy Trust with a $100,000 grant and $35,000 donation from the Friends of the Regent. And we always acknowledge the Friends of the Regent, whose dedicated volunteer team of approximately 70 members continues to provide the theatre with valuable support. This year, January and February, as Neil said, began exceptionally well, with Jimmy Carr and the Rock Orchestra attracting over 6,300 admissions, compared with 571 for the same period last year. Looking ahead, our current year's bookings are encouraging, with 84 days scheduled or pending from January through to June, and 144 days booked from July to December. We always seem to be busier in the second half of the year. And remember, we are very excited that in 2027, we're going to have a great start with the region hosting the New Zealand Squash Open. So overall, the region on Broadway continues to perform strongly across events, attendances and financially. We remain committed to proactive planning to ensure ongoing success, regardless of what is happening around us. And thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Neil, for coming in and presenting always a very exciting report from what's going on at the Regent. I will open for questions from elected members. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, David and Neil. Great to see how well you're doing. I just had some questions about the Palmy Companion card. So in the financials on page 4 of the financials, or page 31 of our report, for the forecast, we've got the actuals for Companion card for 24-25. But then we haven't got anything in the budget going forward. So can you explain why that is? So under financial forecast for periods ending 30 June 2026 to 30 June 2029.
Yeah, I'm just locating it on here.
It's page 4 of your financial report. Financial forecast, sorry. So we've got Palmy Companion card income for 24-25, and then, but there's nothing going forward?
That's something the accountants have put in, but it's not down as an expense for us, because with the Companion card, we just issue the ticket. We have income coming in from the City Council who pay for it, and we then pay it on to Ticketek. So it's through the ticketing agency, not through our books as an expense.
No, I understand that, because it's down as revenue and expense to cancel it.
Yeah.
To cancel it out. I'm just trying to establish that there isn't any plan to stop doing it, since it's not in the predicted budget.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's growing every year.
And I see one of your objectives is to report on the numbers, the numbers of people using Companion card. Do you have an idea of what that is at the moment?
Was in last night's report. I want to say 53, but don't record that, please. It has grown from last year, and I can get you the actual figure.
Okay.
No problems at all.
So, as far as you know, it's a successful scheme that you intend to continue with.
Yes, it is, and and with ticket pricing going up as well, people that have got the Companion card, it allows them to go to these shows. It's $100 a ticket, that they only have to buy the one ticket.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I had a question about the seismic strengthening investigation work that's coming. The officer's report says that elected members should note the risk. I wanted to ask, maybe it's a question for you, Neil, how the board is feeling about that risk, about seismic strengthening work being required.
We manage it. It's an area that's not really directly related to performances, but it is potentially disruptive. It is unfortunately, a blockage to some of the projects that we really want to spend some time and energy into. So the redevelopment, for example, of the Regency Room, etc. So we constantly have to be aware of limitations to the opportunities that's there. We don't anticipate that there will be major disruptions of bookings and shows for the work that needs to be done. There are alternative entrances. It's really the entrance area, above the entrance area, where the strengthening is supposed to occur. So we foresee the risk, we manage the risk, but we don't foresee there's going to be a major impact on the business of the Regent.
Okay. So how will we expect to see that risk being reported on as you come back to the chamber, David? That will turn up in, we said, not maybe a risk to performance nights or numbers, but how will you tell us about it?
We're in dialogue now with the council officers with regard to the seismic strengthening, and we'll have more information by the end of this financial year, by the end of June. and we're going to be co-opted onto the committees to ensure that we're kept up to date and we have our input into what's going to happen.
Great, okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Neil and Dave. Just interested in your commentary there around looking at streaming in the future and making that more widely available, and just would be interested to know what you're thinking about in terms of kind of resourcing to implement that, but also then what you're doing to kind of prove out the audience interest, and in particular audience interest that wouldn't undermine in-person participation.
So it's very early days for that project, and essentially the only discussion we've had at the board level is whether there would be an appetite to consider whether it's viable or not. The presentation we've had compared similar streaming services in other comparable theatres. We don't know many of the questions that you've asked yet because we haven't simply looked into it.
Yeah, no, that's all right, thank you. In, I guess, discussion with some constituents in the community, it's interesting, especially those who have ongoing lived experience with disability, or yeah, I guess have neurodiversity. That means that being in crowded, loud spaces sometimes isn't quite as much fun as watching it from outside. So I'm just, in that investigation, will you be connecting with the disability community locally in any representative way to understand their potential interests in accessing the region via remote participation?
Yes, that's absolutely part of the project, but it's not only the disability, it's the age community, it's you know, if you think of the restrictions we had during COVID, that would allow the region, for example, to still be able to produce entertainment to an audience who cannot physically attend the show. So it's broad ranging. There will be multiple interests that we have to consider.
Great, thank you. Councillor
Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, interesting question for you. Last night I was one of the 1,000-odd people there who were jammed into the region. And about halfway through the evening, there was an announcement from the stage. It made me wonder, and I thought I'm going to ask a question today because you're coming. They asked the young people, hundreds of young people in the mosh pit, to please stop jumping. Is there a problem with the floor at the front of the stage?
That's on a hydraulic, and we didn't anticipate them to be jumping up and down on that. And there was a movement of about that much on the stage. And because we hadn't anticipated it, we hadn't blocked it off. We hadn't, which is about a 2-hour job, basically, to block it off, go underneath the stage. So we hadn't done that.
Okay.
And with the movement of the stage, and for health and safety, we just asked them to,
So you do prepare for it when necessary?
Yes, absolutely.
You didn't expect it last night?
Didn't expect it last night. They just asked for 2 front rows to be taken out, and we thought that's all right.
Yeah.
But no.
There was a large crowd of young ones there.
Yeah, yes, there was over 1,000 people there, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of questions. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, David. You can take a seat back in the gallery, and I'll move that the committee agree the Statement of Intent 2026-29 Attachment 1 submitted by the Regent Theatre Trust Board. Seekers, seconder, Councillor Zabellin. Thank you. And open for any comments. I'll take this opportunity to say, as always, thank you to the Regent Trust Board and staff for the work that you do. You might be entitled to some danger money if there's a risk of councillors in a mosh pit, but we can maybe take that one offline. Great to see the grant funding that continues to come in, that you're able to access those funds, and always a pleasure to see the commitment of the Friends of the Regent and how that reflects in the financial contribution as well. And as somebody who regularly attends the Regent, I'm it's always a pleasure to connect with those friends as they host people as they come through the building, and they do a wonderful job of that for you and for us. I do want to recognise some of the tensions that you both talked about in your presentation. A time of global uncertainty, which may well have impacts on how people feel about the cost of living, on top of what's quite well established as a current cost of living crisis. And that may well have an impact on attendance going forward. And it's encouraging to hear you start to think creatively in things like streaming, about how we might address some of those financial and also access issues for our community. There's some good opportunities there, I think. I think elected members will be keen to keep an eye on that, the outcomes maybe of the seismic strengthening, as that potentially interrupts your booking schedule and ability to host people. So I'll be interested to see that continue to come through your reports. And of course, we're all very interested in your diversification into becoming a sporting arena for squash, taking a leaf out of the Globes book, who are famously holding wrestling. So yeah, good to see our Regent Theatre in good heart, recording excellent numbers and really seeing a diverse cross-sector of our community coming through the doors. I've certainly noticed that over the last few events I've been at, that there's all kinds of people use the Regent, and that's really encouraging to see. So I will ask you all now to vote to agree that statement of intent, please. Thank you, carried unanimously. Next up, the Globe Theatre, with their draft statement of intent for 2026-29. John Adams, Chair of the Globe Theatre Trust Board, here to present, flying solo today. And again, Sarah Claridge available for questions on the officer's report, should she be required. John, I will hand over to you. Welcome.
Kia ora. Thanks, Chair. Mayor, councillors and members of the public that are here. Before I get started, I guess I just want to put in an apology for our manager, Jerry, and I assure you that the absolute coincidence that he's not here, and yesterday was St Patrick's Day. I guess I just want to talk about some of the highlights out of our statement of intent, and thank you for the opportunity to share those. I guess there's a few things. There's the first and foremost is that just the really high utilisation of the facility, the Globe Theatre. In our recent results, there's sort of over 700 or almost 750 venue usages, 303 performances, 24,500 audience members, and almost 3,800 separate venue hires. And that's set to continue going forward. When Jerry and I looked at things a couple of weeks ago, if someone wanted a Thursday, Friday or Saturday night between now and the end of the year, we can't give it to you. And so we're really reassured about that going forward. Like the region, we have a few concerns about cost of living impact on attendances, and that's something we're just going to have to manage. I guess what it shows is that the theatre is really well used and delivering pretty strong value to the city. And the Globe is also one of the most highly utilised cultural facilities that we have here in the city. And the usage is, as those figures show, very, very heavy. A large portion of that is community participants. And it's not just about the audiences, it's about people, enabling people to take part in productions. So 3,700 participants in single years, that includes performances, technicians, volunteers, and production teams. And I think that's a really important function of a community theatre. We provide pretty strong support for community groups. We've got 10 memorandum of understanding groups where we work with people so they've got, with different community groups, so they've got access to the theatre and can do the things that they're trying to do. It makes for affordable access to theatre space, and we have that flexibility with our pricing to do it. And we've got ongoing partnerships with a pretty wide variety of community organisations. The majority of our activity is community-based. 89% of theatre use, 78% of performances are all what we classify as community-based activities. We also attract a number of national and international productions. So it's not just about the local stuff. Last year we had almost 80 what we'd classify as national or international productions, and we're pretty happy about that. They're getting very well received by the arts community in the city. We also think we make a pretty considerable contribution to the council's strategic goals, the growing city, creative city, connected community, and sustainable city. We've also this year the board's taken the initiative of introducing a pretty modern performance measure of Net Promoter Score, and we're just trying to set a baseline for that at the moment. And one of the things that's driven that, it's giving us a measure to look at audience satisfaction, likelihood of recommendation to others to come to the Globe. It still amazes me the people that have lived in the city all their life that have never heard of the Globe, and just their overall experience. It was driven a little bit about, it's very easy to become complacent when things are going well. You know, the staff's happy, the board's happy, we get the impression that the council's happy, and we're all sitting there patting ourselves on the back. And we want just a very realistic bit of a wake-up call about, is that the reality? Or is it just the way we're choosing to interpret it? So hopefully going forward, this Net Promoter Score, which is it's outlined, I think, on page 51 of your meeting notes. It's page 10 of our statement, just how that's calculated and what it's giving us. Hopefully we'll have a bit more information about how far we've got with that when we report to you at the end of the year. We're also making progress on sustainability issues. 98% of the theatre's lighting is now converted to LED. We're currently investigating implementing a solar power system at the theatre. That's taking a wee bit longer than we would have liked, but it's underway. We've introduced waste reduction and some recycling initiatives as well. All those things seem to be moving along. We're pretty strong financially, and I expect a few questions about the reserves that we've got at the moment, and we make no apology for that. I think the COVID period was a real wake-up call for the board, and the board is now resolved to have at least 6 months working capital on hand. It's a pretty fickle industry, as the Regent guys pointed out as well, and that we're expecting a bit of a downturn now with everything that's happened, but who knows? And so to me, it's just responsible for us to take those things into account. We've also got a couple of fairly big initiatives that we are intending to fund out of our own reserves and from outside sources. The lesson, I guess, that came out of the COVID thing was that we got through that without having to seek any additional emergency funding or anything like that. Should we get into that situation again, we will cope with it. There's another couple of other initiatives. We're looking at increasing staffing. We get worried about the staffing liability for holidays, time and things like that occasionally, and we're investigating what we can do around that as well. But we're in a pretty stable position, and that will continue. We've also got a really strong commitment both at a board level and a staff level of collaboration with council. We've worked explicitly on a no surprises type approach, the regular reporting, and an open engagement with council officers and elected members. And I guess to that end, Jerry and I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with any councillors or council staff and talk through some of the things that we are trying to do. So thanks for your time, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. There are some questions for you. We'll start with Councillor Harpenter.
Thank you, John. Very good report. Just one question from me. As a board, what would be your number one? I mean, you talked about 6 months working capital and increasing staff, but what would be your number one risk or number one thing that you would really, as a board, worry about? What keeps you up at night?
Oh, nothing really, but the thing...
Microphone, please, John.
The thing we are concerned about is the fickle nature sounds a bit negative, but of audience attendance. We've got no control over that whatsoever. At times I wonder in Palmerston North whether the venues are our own worst enemy, because there is a lot on. I've rabbited on in the past about comparing what happens in Palmerston North with other centres. We leave most other regional centres in New Zealand for dead in terms of the sheer quantity of stuff on and certainly the diversity. The worry I have is that as times get tight, we end up with very low numbers. We've got enough flexibility in our pricing structures to both encourage the performers and to keep prices low, and we will certainly do that. But that's I guess that's the one big risk, is just we've got no control over who comes in the door.
Okay.
To a certain extent.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, John, for the report, and we're all glad to see the Globe going well. I am going to challenge you a bit on the reserves. In an environment where councils are looking at rate caps and cost of living is impacting on people's ability to pay their rates, how would you justify a lot of cash reserves being held by the Globe? Because I can imagine, an average ratepayer saying to me, well, if they're sitting on a lot of money, why aren't you reducing the grant? So what's your answer to that?
Again, I think it's just being prudent. We've got a couple of projects in the wings that will be expensive, that we intend covering from our own sources, the outside funding, which I mentioned. The most obvious one is that we want to make the whole foyer, bar, cafe area a bit more welcoming and the sort of place that people want to come to for 3/4 of an hour or whatever before a show, and maybe stay afterwards. When that cuts in, that will be a huge impost on our reserves. We're currently exploring wiring the main auditorium for people that are deaf or need assistance in that area. Again, that will be funded out of our own revenue. The other thing is that we also want to be able to have that flexibility with the low community rates. Without those reserves to get us through and to do, we would have to, if we didn't get the funding from the council, we would have to move to a much more commercial model. And so the flexibility we now give the manager to say, hey, listen, if this is a community group, you've got the discretion to charge very low fees to give them access, to do something like a revenue split, or in some cases, as we've got coming up, where we're giving them the use of the theatre for nothing. If we were to move to a more commercial model, some of those things would have to go, and that's not the point of a community theatre. So I've got a clear conscience about that.
Well, I'm certainly not suggesting that you move to a commercial model, if that's what you took from the question. I guess what I'm saying is currently you're providing these concessions to community, and currently, according to your statement of intent summary financials, you're looking at closing cash positions of around about $500,000 for each year projected. So what I am saying is, given that, your answer to a member of the public that said, well, why are council funding the region so much so that they've got a big cash reserve, your answer would be, well, we're holding the cash reserves to do upgrades of the foyer and the inducted loop system in the theatre. Is that the answer to that?
Microphone, John.
Yes, that would be a big part of it. We envisaged the four-year project, and we've had a couple of false starts with that. That will be quite significant. Obviously, we're going to keep talking to council staff because it's their building, but just some of the things that we hope to do, yes, will be more expensive, and that's the main point of the reserves.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, how many paid staff do you have at the moment?
We have 2 full-time staff. We bring in contract technical staff as and when, and we have a pool of 3 people there that we draw on. We desperately need to bring in a third, almost full-time staff member.
That's a comment that got me is, so I noticed that your holiday pay liability, you've got it at 16,000 at the moment.
Yeah.
And you seem to be aiming at maintaining that 16,000
No,
for the next 4 years.
No, there's no intention of maintaining that. Yeah, we acknowledge that that's an issue that's flowing a wee bit below the radar.
Yeah.
And it's partly, I guess I'm not speaking out of turn, a very enthusiastic manager who can't leave it alone.
Yeah.
And the lack of people that are there to fill in. And so we want to address that.
That goes to my next question. Does the manager take enough holidays, and are you at burnout for him?
No, that's a worry, and that's something we're addressing.
Yeah. So that's one thing I see there, just with that figure, that maybe you need
That's
to be
fair
told.
comment. Yep, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, John. Just had a question around the number of performances, and you talked about how it keeps on growing year on year. And you already said that Thursday, Friday, Saturday are pretty well gone for a number of months. Have you given any consideration in the kind of performance measures and planning of kind of, I guess, testing it against or sharing it as a proportion of capacity rather than just the numbers kind of ticking up? Because when I see 740, 750, 760 usages per year, I don't necessarily have an understanding, is that 50% capacity or is that 95% capacity?
That's a fair comment, and it's something that we've talked about time to time. We're always reviewing the performance measures that we use, and it's important that they are telling us a bit more of the information we need. For example, one of the real gaps there is that while we say the evenings are full, we've got surplus space during the daytime, and that's an area that we could certainly address. The thing about capacity, no, but I mean, with a community theatre, the call about whether something goes ahead or not is always down to the performer or the group using it. And if they're happy to go ahead with 7 people, then we'll certainly accommodate it. We're not going to be in the business of, I'll give this a go and we'll cancel it. It's very, very reluctant that Jerry cancels the show. That's always the call of the producer. The group that are putting it on.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't asking about capacity in terms of the size of the rooms. It's just more the number of performances that could actually be fit in. And I think I've heard an answer there in terms of your thoughts on that. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thanks, Hassan.
Thank you. No further questions, so thank you. John, you can turn your microphone off for the final time. There. The recommendations to the committee are that we receive the draft statement of intent 2629, attachment 1, submitted by the Globe Theatre Trust, and that the committee agree the recommended comments on the draft statement of intent 2026-29 outlined in table 1 be advised to the Globe Theatre Trust Board. I will move that. Seeker's seconder, Councillor Zabellin, thank you. And open for comments. First up, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koe, John. Thank you very much for your report. I suppose there were a few things that jumped out at me that I thought were really wonderful, and that was the critical reflection of your operation and the service that the Globe Theatre provides. Also, the responsiveness to the community needs. I applaud the Trust seeing the need for social investment in terms of equity of opportunity to present, and I really admire that, because some community groups can't afford to do things, but they want to get together, and I think it gives a really good indication that you're in tune with the community and being responsive to their needs. Regarding staffing, yes, when I looked at those figures too, and I thought, and married that alongside of the number of performances and so forth, it wasn't difficult to see that obviously someone or someones aren't taking leave. And I think I've heard you mention that as well, about the need to perhaps get a third full-time equivalent member on board, and I would support that, given that you've got evidence to show that there's a need, and also looking after the well-being of the staff, in particular those in the senior leadership. So thank you very much. I've just seen the Globe go from strength to strength over the last few years, and I thank you for, and the Trust, for what you do and your services. Tēnā koe. Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Fides. Councillor Harpeter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to put my thanks to John for putting this report together with Jerry. I think it's a very good report and shows a reflection of the work that the Globe has been doing in our region. I think putting things forward like the Net Promoter Score is actually very good. It makes it a very transparent measure for us to see exactly what is actually happening in the organisation. It was interesting when you said what you felt the biggest risk was for the organisation, particularly for the board, and that was to get the people into the organisation, and I think that is a big risk, and I think was also reflected by the Regent as well. And it is these times that we've got at the moment, and they're not going to be, they're going to be things that are going to happen for the next little while. So thank you for sharing that with us. I also want to just follow on from what the Deputy Mayor has said, that it's a great organisation, and we do really thank you very much for what you have been doing, you and Jerry. So thank you very much, and I just want to say the transparency of your report's been very good. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, John, for the report, and also Jerry and the rest of the staff, who I think is, everyone's acknowledged, you know, everyone is putting in 110%, and that's contributing to the success of the Globe. I do just want to call attention to the reserves, because in the environment that we're in local government at the moment, we're going to be under some fairly tight budgeting constraints going forward. And I think if organisations that we fund have significant reserves, then there's definitely a story to be told, I suppose, on what those reserves are for and whether or not that level of reserve is justified. Because we, in turn, have to justify our grant funding to organisations. And whilst I understand, you know, the impact of COVID has made organisations cautious going forward about potential future hits that their organisation might take, I would just caution against being too cautious, because it's hard for us to justify spending and grants to organisations when they have large amounts of reserves. unless those reserves are well explained and clearly for a defined purpose. So I'm sure you know that I'm a big supporter of the Globe and supporting the arts in general, but I think the realities of what local government is looking at over the next few years need to be clear to everybody.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I definitely take your point, Councillor. I think that is one way that having a decent cash reserve could be spun in the environment that we're in, and I'm very wary of that. But I think the other factors to take into play is that the Globe this isn't necessarily an ongoing trend. They haven't always had a large cash reserve to sit on, and I think, as John points out, that can very easily be eaten away at if the Globe experiences a downturn or challenges, which is not necessarily unlikely in the environment that we're currently in. I think it also means they're less likely to come to council for assistance because they're prepared for challenging times. And having been, unfortunately, unsuccessful in the past at getting funding for those bigger projects, I think looking to meet that within the existing revenue is very responsible. So I think because they haven't always had significant reserves, that's the other side of that story to balance out. But I definitely take your point that caution is sensible.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. And I just had to comment on this. Years of working in community groups myself, 6 months cash reserves is not a large amount of money saved. And to say to an organisation that you've got too much money because you got just on 6 months cash reserve, that to me is a ridiculous statement, because any community group knows 6 months is what we really want to be there to be that much safety. Because when you get to a situation, you're a community group and you only got 3 or 4 months existence, it's very hard to plan, because sometimes grants take 6 months to come through. So any community group that is wise enough to plan 6 months ahead, I encourage them to keep on doing so, because that's just wisdom. And so I don't see it as a negative at all. I think it's a positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, you want to pop back in?
Well, I did just feel perhaps I was being misrepresented there. I haven't said that the Globe has got too much money, and actually they've got 12 months reserves, not 6. What I've said is that the Globe, as all organisations that we fund, need to be aware of the constrained environment the local government is working in, and the message that a large reserve might send if it's not clear what that reserve is going to be used for. So I don't really want my comments misrepresented, Councillor Finlay. Thank you.
Apology noted. Thank you, Councillor Finlay. Thanks for the clarification. Councillor Johnson. So thank you all to wrap that one up. John, you said you took away the impression that the council is happy. I think we want to confirm that your impression is correct. And we would be grateful if you would convey that back to your board and to your staff, please. The council is, I think, delighted with the performance of the Globe and the trend in that performance that we've seen over the last few years. I think to reference some of the discussion we've had today around the carrying of holiday liability, the amount of cash in reserves, in some respects the Globe there is a victim of its own success. You have a manager who's incredibly committed, although not on the day after St. Patrick's Day for reasons best left not covered in public, who gives a huge amount of time. You have an incredibly dedicated board who I'm always amazed to see turning up, for example, behind the bar to help out on nights when you have large numbers of people through the Globe. Your board is a hard-working operational board, and we do appreciate that. Certainly this reflected for me a conversation we had with the Regent many years ago, before the current manager, about the Regent carrying a very large holiday liability, and some elected members will remember that. It is the nature of the beast in theatre work particularly, that it's antisocial hours and it's long hours, and that has consequences for staff liability for holidays. So there is something to be watched there, and elected members are right to draw attention to it, and I'm glad to hear the board is thinking about how you address that. Further on the point about the cash reserves, yeah, there is a high bar for the use of public funds, and it's right to raise that here. You're expressing an intention about how you might use that money. It's our job as the governors of that grant funding to determine whether that's something we're comfortable with, and we do that by thinking about the amount of grant that we offer to our CCOs, in this case the Globe. So I would echo Councillor Johnson's comments that clarity of intention for holding those reserves will become increasingly important, and to highlight the risks of projects that might not go ahead for lack of external funding. That's very valid. Also, the time frame and the reason for needing to do those projects will come under increasing scrutiny. So I think this is a timely conversation as we move into next year's LTP and a review of Council's statement of expectations for our CCOs, that kind of clarity and transparency is going to be required. And it's encouraging to hear our CCOs starting to think in that regard. So I think that was all I wanted to say on that. Thank you, John, for coming in today. Best wishes to the Globe and the staff, and thank you for the statement of intent that you presented to us. I will ask us to vote, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to our next item on the agenda, which is Te Manawatu Museums Trust, 6-month report, 1 July to 31 December 2025, and the draft statement of intent for 2026 to 29. Welcoming Susanna Shadbolt, Chief Executive of Te Manawa, Geoffrey Jameson, the Chair of the Te Manawa Museums Trust Board, and Sarah Allen, who's the Assets and Finance Partner at Te Manawa. You're all very welcome with us today, and I will hand over to you. Oh, also noting that Sarah Claridge is available for questions on the officer's report, should that be required. Over to you. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou tātou. Firstly, thank you very much for giving the introduction, saves me 30 seconds. And yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair, the Mayor in absentia, councillors, and also council staff, without whose support we wouldn't exist, and whose ongoing support is highly valued. Also like to welcome, we've got Simon Barnett from the board here, and a number of staff from Te Manawa in support. So the big thing that we're addressing right now is the Science Centre project. This is sort of not business as usual, which is why you'll find it separated out in the financials, so to give transparency to the scope of a very ambitious project. In response to comments that have been made about reserves, we are spending down our reserves that have been accumulated in support of the Science Centre project, for which capital funding is being acquired, but the challenge in that space is actually in the OPEX and the need for, because it's not business as usual, expanded, we've got to bring in external people to help get the project completed. So without any further ado, turn over to Susanna to present our report and statement of intent.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I begin by acknowledging our mana whenua, rangitane, and thank them for continued engagement, guidance and support. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I also thank our elected members and council officers for your ongoing commitment to investment in and also engagement with Te Manawa. I thank the members of the Trust Board for their governance and stewardship of our waka, and acknowledge the continued effort, dedication and professionalism of our staff. Before I begin, I want to point out 2 misstatements on the agenda and recommendations that were meant to be adjusted. 4.1, the second bullet point, should read, have been successful in 2 grant applications for the Science Centre development, not 4. As of 6 months, that is. And we also recently appointed a dedicated staff member for fundraising, and we hope this position will help us sustain this success. Also, point 5.2 should read, the Science Centre is contingent upon receiving funding through grants and sponsorship, so not state the figure 1.75 million. Today, I'm pleased to present to you the results from the past 6 months. Te Manawa has been navigating a transformational phase with a firm future focus, aspiring and working towards being a true museum of the future. So looking back today is also about looking forward. In the past 6 months, we have been bedding in a complete overhaul of our financial and operational system and processes. It has not been without its challenges, but has been necessary in order to improve our fiscal responsiveness, sustainability, and transparency. I want to note that the presentation of financials in this report has been undertaken following advice from council officers. As expected, the largest of our expenses lies within the development of the new Science and Innovation Centre, as we look to deliver the biggest transformation in the museum in almost 20 years. This involves employing funds that have been accumulated over a long period of time, but that will need to be balanced and replenished. A planned reduction of our cash and cash equivalents has resulted in a reserve balance that is lower than it typically would be. But budget management and continued fundraising efforts will replenish those over time. For those of you who attended our recent status update, thank you for your time and feedback. It is really heartening to hear that there's confidence in our ability to deliver on this project. In fact, as of now, more than 2/3 of the needed funds have already been pledged or secured from Lotteries New Zealand, the Science Centre Trust, of course Council and Te Manawa, and a significant funder to be announced further down the track. This equates to well over $2 million so far, which is a huge vote of confidence in the importance and value add of our project. Also, T.G. McCarthy Trust are supporting the redevelopment of the learning classroom ahead of the Science Centre commencement. It's a separate project, but one that will be closely aligned with the final product. We still have a lot of work ahead of us, but these results show that our renewed focus on fundraising and growing our external revenue is getting the results. This is especially pleasing in what is an increasingly difficult funding environment. We are not just fundraising for big ticket projects, but also to cover increasing operational costs. Last time we met in this chamber, we were asked if Te Manawa might follow the example of some other institutions looking at paid admission. Paid general admission to the wider museum isn't something we want to put to our communities, but paid exhibitions and programs must be considered. In May, we opened the interactive science exhibition Air Playground from Melbourne's Museums Victoria. It will carry a charged admission price, but we also recognise the need to remain accessible. To that end, we are seeking support from local businesses to sponsor community days for free or subsidised admission. I'm pleased to say we've already have our first 2 on board. This will be a test to help inform our decisions around admission to the new Science and Innovation Centre. Revenue generation, diversification and a stronger business focus will be key to our future. And we are not alone in this, so I don't think this should come as any surprise. Museums have significant value to our heritage, our identity and our social and cultural cohesion. Of course we say that, but our focus is also on protecting and investing in that value by being acutely mindful of the costs. Sometimes unexpected situations require us to adjust our plans and reallocate funds accordingly, just like everyone else. The Science Innovation Centre is a significant investment in our public spaces, but behind the scenes we have spaces in need of it too. Our buildings are not just earthquake prone, but the past 6 months have presented biodiversity challenges that we are working hard to mitigate with some much appreciated input and support from council officers. Recently, 3 art loans were declined as the art gallery does not meet professional industry standards for temperature and humidity control, despite our investment in technology that has increased its efficiency. It is in an increasingly digital age, the lack of Wi-Fi and connectivity to the network throughout the complex is also impeding the safeguards that our collection relies on. A huge amount of work has been undertaken in reorganising the spaces, protecting the collection and installing much needed new shelving donated to us. It's worth noting that the addition of manual temperature controls has helped reduce our energy consumption by 24%. I really appreciate support from council officers in investigating off-site storage, and I know that the facility remains a priority for council. We will work alongside you to identify opportunities and find solutions and put forward improvements and continue to keep our visitor experiences fresh, relevant, and also exciting. I want to finish by highlighting some incredible exhibition achievements over the past 6 months. We have exhibited Toloa Tales Pacifica films, works from the Manawatu Embroiderers Guild, curated He Momona Te Whanau, the Aotearoa Jewellery Triennial, a Te Manua curated exhibition that has shown in Nelson and is now on its way to Waikato Museum. Robin Kahukiwa, also curated by Te Manua in collaboration with the New Zealand Portrait Gallery, exhibited here, as well as in Wellington, Hamilton and Wairarapa. Our annual Te Waranga o Aotearoa and Massey University student exhibitions, Feathers, Fur and Bone, fashionable animals featuring items from the collection. And Te Manua also curated a major show with internationally acclaimed artist Brent Harris, currently on display, Home and Back Again, also featuring collection items. And of course we've got Santa's Cave and Peter Bush Out in the Field, which is collection based. While we presently have challenges, we also have opportunities as we continue to inspire and educate our visitors. That's what museums for the future are built on. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa.
Thanks all three for the presentation. I'll open for any questions. I just wanted to pick up on some of those challenges that you mentioned there, Susanna, and other elected members might have follow up on some of these. Can we start with the biodiversity challenges of the building? What does that mean?
We have some issues with temperature and humidity control in the art gallery in particular, and we have some bug issues in the heritage collection store that we are dealing with.
Okay. Are the bug issues, obviously there's an impact on the collection and you'll have to manage that as the curator of those. Is that a building issue and therefore a council issue, or is it a Te Manua issue?
It's probably a little bit of both, because the bora is also in part of the building, so presumably it started there some years ago. Okay. And our collection staff are working very hard to mitigate the risk and clean and wrap each item, and we are getting a freezer container in as well to deal with the issues, but it will probably set the team back about 12 months. And this is also the issue with the Wi-Fi and lack of connectivity in the store, because everything has to be done manually.
Okay. Have you been working with council officers on the building issues?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe that's something I will follow up offline, looking at Glenn. And the declined exhibitions for environmental reasons, does that relate? Or is that
it does
separate?
for the art gallery, because we, of particular the fluctuation in temperature and humidity, so the likes of Auckland Art Gallery or Te Papa are unable to lend us items from their collection.
Okay. And presumably in the future, if we're unable to attract those kind of exhibitions, that would limit your ability to charge, to have exhibitions that people would be willing to pay to see?
Yes, although normally we don't charge in the art gallery, but also eventually it does compromise our own collection as well in the art gallery.
Thank you. And Wi-Fi connectivity, again, is that a Te Manua question or a council as the building owner question?
That's a good question.
And we don't have an answer to that?
No.
Is an officer able to... Who might be best? Glenn. Glenn, would you be able to speak to that? So the question was really about where responsibility sits for Wi-Fi connectivity in the Te Manua complex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, Glenn Bunny, Manager Property. We are working with the Te Manawa team on a number of aspects that you've heard some of. Wi-Fi would ordinarily be a tenant issue, but if there is infrastructure that has to go into the asset to provide that facility, that would possibly fall to the building owner, i.e. council.
So I think the answer is it's complicated.
Yes.
Yes, okay, we'll keep a watching brief on that, and Suzanne, it's something we can continue to discuss. A question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Susanna. Jeff. So in the 6-month report, there's under one, you've got innovative experiences that engage visitors, and you've got the performance measures. But under support PNCC cultural events, for the 6-monthly report, you've got no activity to report this period. Is there a reason for that? So it's on page 72 of our papers, or I don't know what page it is, page 4 maybe of your 6-month report.
Thank you for your question. Those activities and support, they're largely connected with events that council hold. As you can see here, the Waitangi Day, for example, or Diwali Festival, and also Festival of Cultures. So they are largely around. It's largely around the timing. So we are supporting those events and have done so.
Okay, but Diwali would have been in the period that you reported on.
Yes, that's correct. And we did not support council in that with that event.
So is that a change of direction, or is it just one of those things, or?
It's just one of those things, no change in direction. No, we always support the council festivals.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report and statement of intent. Around a couple questions. I guess one is, I was quite amazed to read that a simple switch to manual controller, it sounds quite simple, gave a 24% improvement in energy efficiency. Was that expected? Was that just a pleasant surprise after it was all done?
A little bit of both. It was certainly not that it was that high. It was certainly not expected. So that had to do with turning some of the controls off overnight and then starting them again in the morning. Unfortunately, saving the 24%, and everyone knows the cost of energy has risen, does not eventuate really in a saving there. And the price is still going up.
No, understood from a purely financial point of view. Related in terms of temperatures and humidity, so the situation that you face where we actually can't bring materials into the city, is that something that we're just going to live with for the foreseeable, or is there, what's the outlook there?
It is, again, very complicated, and we're dealing with very old buildings, of course, that probably continuously need to be upgraded, but we're working with council officers on those issues, and it's not something that can easily be resolved.
And standards have risen for expectations, never mind that Renaissance art and even pre-Renaissance art was stored in unair-conditioned, unclimate controlled spaces, but the standards now have changed substantially from medieval and Renaissance times.
Indeed. So is it, other than a new museum, is there anything that is likely or possible in the meanwhile?
There's some way of mitigation, but we have basically explored everything that we can do internally, so it is really some improvements to the building that will need to happen.
Right, thank you. I think that's it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hello. Just looking at your balance sheet on page 81 of our report. So what have you been using the reserves for to date?
Almost all of the reserves used so far have gone towards the Science Centre project.
Okay.
we haven't been able to use grant funds for the Science Centre project yet. We had to get a lot of the preliminary planning paid for out of our own reserves first before the grant funding would come through.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That is the end of questions. Thank you very much for coming in and speaking to the committee today. Jeff.
Thank you. Ngā mihi nui.
Kia ora. So we have 3 recommendations for the committee to consider. Council receives the 6-month performance report 1 July 31 December 2025 attachment 1 submitted by Te Manawa Museums Trust. That Council receives the draft statement of intent 26 to 29 attachment 2 submitted by Te Manawa Museums Trust, and that Council agree the recommended comments on the draft statement of intent 26 to 29 outlined in table 4 be advised to Te Manawa Museums Trust. I'm happy to move those. Seconded by Councillor Zabellin. Will open for any comments. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Our next and last item on the agenda is the committee work schedule. I will ask the General Manager if he has anything to say about that.
Nothing further to add, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will move that the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee receive its work schedule dated 18 March 2026, seconded by Councillor Zabellin. Open for any comments or questions. There is a change that the Administrator is asking me to note, which is that the Regent won't present a final report because we agreed it today, so that will come off the list. No other comments, questions. I'll ask you to vote. I'm going to say carried unanimously. There seems to be an ever-decreasing number. We'll assume that's right. That's fine. Okay, we're good. We've still got a quorum, it brings us to the end of our agenda today. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I will ask the Deputy Chair to close for us with karakia, and then we'll just check there's nothing else happening today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Me karakia tātou, kia putau ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumie, huie, tākie. Kia ora.
Fire Deb, is there anything else happening today, or are we released for an early lunch?
To my understanding, that is that, Madam Chair, so released.
I feel like a winner.
Ngā mihi,